Good evening, everyone. This is Dana Point Community Workshop on Wednesday, June 23rd at 6:05 p.m. And I'm calling this meeting to order, or the workshop to order. And I'd like to ask Shana Sharkey to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So would you please stand? Everybody please stand and face the flag.
Place your right hand over your heart, ready to begin. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you. Now I would like to turn it over to Alan Fenstermacher from Rattan & Tucker, and he'll provide an overview for this evening. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Virtually, I'm Alan Fenstermacher with the City Attorney's Office, and the reason for this public hearing community workshop is that following the recent census results, which have not been finalized yet, but every city that has district elections is required to hold 4 hearings. This is the first one of those required 4 hearings, and adopt new maps. And when I say new maps, all that we really need to be doing legally is confirming that we are population balanced, meaning that the total population in each district is, more or less within a 10% standard deviation of each other. So that's our main task here. Obviously, we have to comply with all the other rules relating to districting, about how we district, both related to the California Voting Rights Act, Federal Voting Rights Act, and state law. But the existing districts were just recently drawn, and those basically comply with all those requirements. So really our main task here is just looking at the new population numbers and looking to see what adjustments, if any, might be required by the council, then of course taking public input on that process. So because we're, again, focusing on the numbers and not the legal issues, I'm going to pass it over to Justin here from National Demographics Corporation, NDC, which is the city's demographics consultant. He's going to be presenting some of the new numbers from the census, which he can explain better than I. Aren't quite finalized yet, but have a pretty good idea of what's going on, and he'll walk you through our schedule and what the process is going to be like.
Thank you, Alan. My name is Dr. Justin Levitt with National Demographics, and it's a pleasure to be here tonight to begin the process of talking about the current districts and the timeline for looking at them and kind of adopting a map for the next 10 years. To kind of briefly walk through the timeline, the state requires a minimum of 4 public hearings. This is the first of the 4 today on June 23rd. The second of the third will be on July 20th at the regular City Council meeting. In addition, we will hold 2 hearings on October and February to look at the census numbers once they've been released and figure out what changes, if any, need to be made to the current district maps. Our deadline for the map adoption is April 17th, 2022. And using the February 15th meeting, we have plenty of time, if necessary, to adopt a map and make sure that we can use it for the next 10 years. As Alan mentioned, one of the big challenges with districting or redistricting this year is the delay in the census data. We are not likely to get official census data until the middle of August, and then the state actually looks at that census data and adjusts it. They call this the prisoner alignment or the prisoner adjustment. And cities and counties are required to use these adjusted numbers. This data should be available at the end of September or early October. Once this data is available, of course, we will release it and we'll have it widely available. For those of you who are new to the process, or perhaps for those of you who remember this from a couple of years ago, the criteria have changed slightly in terms of the factors we need to take into account. While we still have to comply first and foremost with the federal criteria, which are equal population, each of the 5 city council districts needs to have about the same number of total residents. a number that includes everybody, including children, non-voters, non-citizens, everybody counted as part of that census effort. We also have to comply with the Federal Voting Rights Act. While race cannot be the only or the predominant factor in the creation of a district, it's one thing that we have to look at, and we'll talk about that more as we look at your numbers here tonight. A new state law actually then rank orders many of our additional criteria, the so-called traditional redistricting criteria that are now ranked in that middle column in the PowerPoint. So for example, districts first have to be geographically contiguous. That means that all parts of the district must touch each other. Then we have to look for undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest. Then we have to look to make sure the districts have easily identifiable boundaries, such as following major roads or freeways or other features that are easy for people to understand. And after that, we look at compactness. And the state law defines compactness as not reaching around a group of people to grab another group of people, bypassing a different community. In addition, the state law requires that we not look at partisanship or party registration or anything along those lines. And so you'll note that in all of our data sets, we do not use party any information about registration or voting by party at all. Finally, once you've looked at all of these rank-ordered criteria in this order, we can also consider other principles, such as minimizing the number of voters that shifted between districts, such as respecting the voters' choices and respecting the fact that the voters of the city have elected a city council. Also looking at future population growth, if we know of anything that is likely to change in the next 10 years. And so what all of this is about is not so much a call to completely throw out the map and start over, but a call to look at the map and make sure that it's still in compliance with these criteria and make the adjustments necessary to continue to comply with the criteria. So on our next slide, while we don't have the final total population counts, I do want to emphasize that we do have all of the additional information that we need. All of the data for the Voting Rights Act analysis, for example, is current and will not change as we go through the process. So if we see here citizen voting age population, that's the population over the age of 18 that has US citizenship. Those numbers will stay consistent throughout this redistricting process. Looking at, we also have estimates of the population. And while these estimates are not going to match exactly what the 2020 census will tell us, we are very confident that these estimates are close. And what these estimates show is that the city overall is about the same population as it was 10 years ago. Only minor adjustments here and there are necessary to bring the districts into compliance. And of course, after October, we'll take a look with the census's final counts of the population to give you your final deviation. That total deviation number, which is 15.6% here, we want to get that under 10%. And one of the things we'll check in October is whether or not it already might be under 10%. With the number of people, a swing of 100 or so voters or residents could actually be the difference between a legal plan and not legal plan. Looking at your Voting Rights Act analysis, one thing that we look at is where do we see concentrations of protected class groups? And we didn't find any such concentrations specifically for Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, or Native Americans in Dana Point. This map, on the color scheme on this map, is that areas that are in purple are under 25% Latino. And as you can see here, the only blocks that are not under 25% Latino, there's a big pink block. That block only has 3 people in it. So we're not talking about major populations here of non-white residents. And you kind of see that in the total numbers. 81% of the total residents were non-Hispanic white by eligible voters. As part of our analysis, And I want to point you online to look at some of this in more detail if you're interested. We are looking at other socioeconomic factors such as income and housing. We are looking at your neighborhoods and trying to figure out where exactly your communities are. And we want you to help us understand that. And I think for the most part, many of you came out 2 years ago, and did just that, and helped us understand where your neighborhoods and communities were as you went through the process of drawing the districts in the first place. And so, when we ask these questions, what are your neighborhoods and what are your communities of interest? Well, first of all, the law requires us to ask, but we also want to emphasize that, if we do have to tinker at the margins to get them into balance, what is a good place to make that adjustment? Where do we prevent ourselves from dividing a community or neighborhood when we're making those small, minor adjustments? And we can think of these as things like geographic areas that share common homeowners associations, economic interests, influenced by the same roads, the same things that we might think of as traditionally bringing a neighborhood or community together. To help illustrate this, we have a couple of just links to maps that I want to point out. The city has a wonderful little neighborhood HOA map online where you can look at different zones that the city has designated for everything from fire protection and beach impact areas to formal homeowners associations. A lot of that demographic data will eventually be available later this month in a story map, which allow you to basically look at those socioeconomic characteristics like income and percent renter in graphic form in a map. And eventually, what we will have is an application tool where you'll be able to review the different maps, the current districts, as well as any proposed revisions once we hit that October meeting, or once we hit that October data availability and we start looking at new revisions to the current districts if necessary. We will have them available in this interactive review map. And so at this first stage, what we're really looking for is just to start this conversation about how the current districts work for the city, and if there needs to be adjustments or changes, where is it best to make them? Even if we're not looking at blowing up the entire map, we are looking potentially at minor rechanges. So what kind of issues or concerns do you have about the current district map? And for those of you who are not here tonight, the city has a website, phone number, and email address for you to participate and leave your comments for the council. For us, the demographer, we promise that we'll read every comment. The council will take it very seriously, and we look forward to hearing from you as we go through this process. I'm now going to turn it back over to Kathy to wrap us up.
Thank you, Justin. I'm looking at our next item on the agenda, which is public comment, and this evening we don't have anyone here to speak. So we're going to move on, and basically I wanted to just ask if either one of you had any other further comments. Otherwise, we will adjourn this meeting.
No, nothing further.
Just look forward to hearing from you, and it's great to be back in Dana Point and to see you all again.
Thank you. Therefore, I'd like to go ahead and adjourn this meeting to our next meeting, regular meeting, which will be on July 20th, beginning at 5 p.m. at the City Council Chamber, 33282 Golden Lantern, Suite 210. Mind you, at that point, the hearing for this particular item may start at a different time. It may not be at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. is the start of closed session. Thank you again, and we are adjourned.